always think of God and our ancestors are also watching us all the time. And so even if people are not physically watching, besides Zao, like there's all the Jews that are in history have always watched us, are watching us who have passed, and they're appreciating us in this podcast that we're doing or
I
this
hope so. They take
video.
partake in podcasts, you think?
Well, I think that yeah, all their spirits that are left after they've passed, or parts of them that are still left, and they're just enjoying all the rest of us who are still living, as well as maybe they're. That's my weird cosmology. So I'm just thinking that every Jew that's ever lived is seeing us making these Haggadahs out of our history into this new way, and they're loving it. They're enjoying. They're like, oh my gosh, look at our ancestors doing this. So that's
I,
how I'll start this session by saying that even if there's not a lot of people on it right now, they're enjoying what we're doing. Does it make any sense? All the people that have
I
passed.
accept it. I accept your positivity and your cosmic flow. I appreciate it. All right, let's
We'll
turn this
begin.
mother out, as they
All
say.
right. Um, say first is like you started with the emoji Haggadah in 2019. That was your first Haggadah, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me
And
just for the viewers,
put it
I've
on the
got this
screen. Yeah,
whole.
I have a copy here too.
I
Yeah.
realize, by the
Yeah.
way, you have to hold it close to your face when you've got a virtual
Yeah.
background. Okay,
True. So we have these
here
two.
they
And
are.
so this one was the first one, and it was a huge success. And I think probably because it was a lot of kids. I think a lot of kids like loved the emojis. And so I was wondering, when you saw that tweet from Valerie Levin, you talk about introduction, like why has anyone made a dad joke Haggadah? Do you think you seized upon that particular idea because it was so good for kids potentially? Like every kid loves these kind of dad jokes, these knock knock jokes, these we're going to call them not knock knock jokes, but these kind of yeah. What made you seize upon the idea more specifically? Yeah,
So obviously, because I've written so many previously, I'm always looking for the next idea, whatever it might be.
yeah,
And people obviously, and the same thing must be for you. Just like comedians, people always probably say to them, "Oh, I've got material for you. I've got something you think is funny," right? So you try to pay
yeah.
attention to these things, and some of them are going to make sense, and some of them are not. So basically, when people come up to me and go, "I have a Haggadah idea for you," so my first question always is, "Okay, thank you. Tell me what the four questions looks like." Chad Gadya, and Shvo Chamascha, pour out thy wrath. And then we can go from there, I suppose. Also, I need to know who the God figure is, who the deity is that's freeing somebody from something,
So it's
right?
dad here.
It's right. So no, no. In this case, yes, it's that's the Overlord, right? In my Star Wars Haggadah, it's the Force. In the Festivus Haggadah, it's Frank Costanza,
Yeah.
and so forth and so on. So when I saw, and sometimes it doesn't really work. Like somebody said to me, the Squid Games Haggadah, and I'm like, okay, well, what am I? How's this work? How's this work?
Oh, right. Yeah, I haven't seen that show, so I have no idea honestly.
Oh,
But
so
yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead and binge.
Okay, all
It's good
right.
stuff, but I don't know if it translates well
Yeah,
into pages of a Haggadah. But when I saw Valerie Levin's post, so for people viewing this podcast, basically I was just minding my own business one day, and
yeah.
this lady named Valerie Levin, who happens to live in my neighborhood, posts, "How come the dad jokes Haggadah doesn't exist?"
Oh, so you know her personally. She's
No,
like a
I
friend.
didn't know her
Oh,
personally at the
oh,
time.
you don't know her
No,
personally. Oh, wow. Okay.
she was just a random person in the universe, and she just posted it. And the next thing
Wow.
I know, half a dozen friends of mine tagged me, and they said, there you go. This is your next Haggadah."
Oh man,
And I
that's so
looked at it and I
funny.
was like, well, I think you're all correct. You're
Oh
absolutely
wow.
right. This is my next
Wow.
project. So, okay,
Yeah.
let's get going. And that's just what I did. It was the first idea that ever was like, boom, we're off to the races.
Huh. First,
Immediately upon recommendation, boom,
just
we're
what just did
flying with
it.
the idea.
Yeah. So I also noticed in the introduction, you assembled a super team to help source jokes, and then you said this was the first time you ever told them the name of it before you started working with it. Have you made it like a sounding board in the past, and how is it different this time? And how does that work for you to work with the team like
Well, I've become less arrogant over time, the more success I've had.
that?
And I realize that it takes a village, right? I
Yeah.
I try to be funny. I try to be funny. Every comedian does this. They kill themselves with new material in front of harsh crowds. This is what New York City comedy clubs are for. You'll see the most famous celebrities who you pay $500 a ticket to go see, go to like the Comedy Cellar and get slaughtered. because they got to test the material somewhere and you can't test it on a big stage, right? So that's the humbling experience of trying to be funny. And then,
Yeah.
so in my case, so I try to be as funny as possible, just like you try to be as funny as possible. But I stopped thinking at some point that I am the wizard and the, be all end all of what's funny. So I decided with the Star Wars Haggadah, this was the first one that I completely crowdsourced
Oh,
because
okay, cool.
because I wanted to know, is it funny? Is it good? What do you all think? I tried to perfect it. I didn't want to think that I'm so full of myself that I think, no, I'm the arbiter of what's funny and I will decide. So I humbled myself and I started crowdsourcing. So I crowdsourced for that one, and I certainly crowdsourced for the dad jokes because the dad jokes, if you ever read any joke book of any kind, including dad jokes, they're
Yeah.
filled with average, not so funny, and like 10% is funny, but I really wanted it all to be hilarious. Like I wanted it to be the most well curated jokes you've ever read. And
Yeah.
and I needed the soundboard for it. And I spun them off my wife and kids and I drove them crazy and hopefully the cream rose to the top. Um,
Yeah. I
so
think I think there's just some really funny stuff. Yeah, I was gonna say, um, so there's different categories, which was I thought was fascinating. You broke down these categories. Is that was that actually the real category breakdown, or did you just come up with funny numbers? Because it was you said 652 jokes
yes.
into seven categories, such as 43% multi-source raw jokes in the original form, 20% reworded jokes, and 7% derived from my imagination. Could you point out some specifics from each of those three categories? Like what
Oh
were some of the
boy,
ones that were,
I'll have to reference.
reworded, for instance, for maximizing the funny you say, and what were some of your own?
Um,
And yeah, I'm curious kind of this heated hear the differences between those. Yeah.
well, so one of the categories that I specific, and I'll try to find it as I flip through these pages, but church signs are hilarious. Right? They're hilarious. And I looked at, the funniest church signs you could find, and I tried to reformat them into something Passover related. And I was
Hmm.
pretty successful on many of those. Some of them were just like screaming to be included because they're just so good. I'd have to really
Well, yeah, I would. Yeah, I also say that on page 59, I mean, I was just blown away by
59.
the actual Passover jokes. I thought that they were so funny. Like, what kind of shoes did the Egyptians wear during the plague of frogs? Open toed. Just that kind of pun was really funny. I also really like this one. And what Xbox game was inspired by a plague? Halo. So were those two, for instance, like which of those were? What categories those two fall in? If you have a memory of those.
Okay, so let's see. So Open Toad was so that was one of the ones that I found in its original form. That's just funny on the face of it, period.
Yeah. So you find that on like Reddit or Google? Like how do you
Yeah,
find it?
You just Google any. I mean, just
Google
Google
it.
jokes, Google dad jokes.
Passover dad jokes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so Passover dad jokes is limited. Then you got to go for jokes. Then you got to look for knock knock jokes. Then the church signs, like I mentioned. And
Yeah.
I found a website called upjoke.com, and
Cool.
it's kind of a reputation website. You have words that are categories, and people make their best puns with that word, and people vote. So
Ah.
the funniest float to the top, just like the way that I was writing, I was looking for ways to make things float to the top. And that website was like a mind meld because that was operating in very much the same way. I just want to
Wow.
say I just want to say thank you for pointing out this page because it was the page I worked hardest on. It's the
I thought it was incredible. Yeah, it really stood out
Yeah,
to me as like a really, really, really funny page. There's another one on that page. It was like, why didn't most Egyptians know about the ninth plague? They were kept in the dark. I thought that
that's
was
a simple one. That's actually,
really, really good. Yeah, it's simple, but it's just so true to, yeah. I guess that's the other question I had. So those were like very specifically Passover related. And then there were some other ones, other pages, like, like a page 103. And it's like a section about kings, which to me felt like it was related because we're talking about a pharaoh who's like a ruler, he's like a despot, he's a dictator. And so we're kind of thinking about what kings or pharaohs are like over time. Was there like how do you determine what goes into the book, what doesn't? Like so that to me, were you thinking like, yeah, is that where you're thinking that's a king? I'm gonna make that a king page, a pharaoh related page. Like how do you determine what goes in, what doesn't go in is my question.
what I did was basically I followed whatever the Hebrew text was on the one side of the page. All right, there it is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I tried to theme it to what was on the opposite page to the best of my ability.
Okay.
Sometimes it was a stretch, but most of the time it was spot on. The
Yeah.
specific topics are discussed. Um, the blessing at the end of the meal was all about food, and there's just a million dad joke food.
Food jokes.
I
Yeah.
just had food jokes, and then there was the section at the end, who knows one? So I tried to find as many jokes as I could for the number one, the number two, the three.
Numbers. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
kept
That's smart. Yeah.
just kept going with that, and yeah. So I that was the difficult part. It was finding jokes is easy. There's a lot of good material out there. Pairing it up with the text on the side, that was
Right.
the hard part. That's where I stressed myself
Yeah.
out.
And that's where you excel. I think you have this really strong weave between the two, you know. So do most people in your community who read this book, are they reading the Hebrew on the left? Like how does the book function for you in the best possible way at an actual Seder table? Like how does it function at your Seder table? How would you like it to function at other people's Seder tables?
So thanks for asking that question. So because I do have an ideal and an image, and I think I know some people who actually use it the way I would like it. So
Yeah.
first of all, I tell everybody, go ahead and spill grape juice all over the thing. You're not offending me. You're not losing your money or your investment. Go ahead, make sure it's used.
Yeah,
I'm connected to it in the force. I will feel the spill and just be happy that it's being used. Um,
for
so
sure.
so my Haggadot all have the Haggadah text on the side, so it's a practical use Haggadah. So I wouldn't mind if the leader of the Seder is sitting there reading from the left, and the entire rest of the family is reading all the material on the right, and everyone is trying to instruct and entertain each other, and that's the ideal. So each of the Haggadahs I've written, they're all targeting a niche crowd, right? So the
Sure.
Emoji Haggadah specifically, 8 to 12-year-old girls. That's that's the target market for that. They read text like the ancients read hieroglyphics. That's just it's a natural feel for it. That's who is targeted for it. Star Wars is
Yeah,
obviously for my generation of Gen X. Shakespeare is for literature majors, but dad jokes is everyone. It's for everyone, which
sure.
which makes me worried about what I'm going to think of next. Can I go niche again, or do I have to think of something universal again? We'll worry about that until somebody posts something, and then I get tagged on that post.
I was gonna say, so you're a dad, right? You're a dad. You have kids.
Yes, and
So what do your kids think of your Haggadahs? This one, but other ones, like what are your different age kids, and you said boys and girls, like what do they think of your Haggadahs? Haggadahs.
so first of all, I got girl, boy, boy, 19, 17, 14. That's what I've been blessed with. Bunch of good kids.
Amazing.
They don't read them, but they're entertained by the fact that their dad writes them and does
Yeah,
talks and signs
yeah,
them and sometimes goes to schools. And
cool.
they're at book sales in their little universes. So they're amused by the fact that I do it. But they haven't really sat down to fully enjoy. Uh,
Do you read them to them at the Seder though? Like are they have to kind of experience it through you and when you lead the Seder?
I try to do it until they roll their eyes. And by the way, for the record, just in case you haven't seen my t-shirt, this is
Yeah. Dad
required.
jokes are hot. Oh wow.
There it is. There, that joke. So
Yeah.
yeah, they bought it for me last Father's Day. So there you go.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
yeah, so they're just amused. The dad jokes are gonna may come in use. I think it's going to be used differently because I think it's actually amusing, and they might want to use it. So that remains to be seen. I'll find out. Where are we? 2 months away from
All right.
Passover.
Yeah. Um, so we're what I guess kind of going back to the other books for a bit,
Yeah.
I think we talked about the emoji I got it briefly, but you know, was your goal like to make something for you said just for girls of a certain age? Was that your thinking and is I want to make it for them or were you just I like emojis? Like so what was your were you really thinking in that targeted way? What made you do that one
No,
to
so
start
that
it all
was
off?
that was completely an accident. I didn't set myself down this path with any intent. It just happened organically. And
Yeah.
so I have an origin story. So basically, one Purim, we all decided to dress up as emojis.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And I forget what everyone else was, but my wife was the poop emoji because she's a great sport. So for the bag of candy that we give out to our friends and neighbors, we tried to theme it also with emoji stuff, and I wanted to put in a little note of, who they received the little bag from.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? Let's see, we're working on an emoji theme. So what I did was I converted Megillat Esther, which we read on Purim, into emoji. I summarized each of the 10 chapters into
Oh,
emoji
so you did
form.
it originally as a Megillah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
And when I was done, I was completely amused. This was 2017, by the way. I was completely amused. I looked at it and I was like, can I actually convert this into something that people might actually read? And I knew the answer wasn't Megillat Esther because that's something you speed through real fast.
Hmm.
Yeah, nobody's
Hmm.
going to take the
Okay.
time and sit down and read it. That's just not what happens. And I was like, the Siddur, the daily prayer book, and I was like, I don't. This is not the. Nobody's gonna have fun with that. And I was like, wait a second. People need a Haggadah that they might actually be amused by. So
Yeah.
why don't I do this? Why don't I take this emoji set and transfer it to the Haggadah? And so and so it took me a while. It took me about a year
Yeah.
and a half, I think, to put it all together. And then I self-published it in 2019, and it started to get some very, very interesting attention. Um, it remains, I think, I'm pretty confident that it is the only completely emoji book that exists in the world.
Oh, really? You think so? I
I
didn't know
think
that.
so.
Wow.
There are a couple of Japanese authors that have made their own emoji set to tell stories, but not
Yeah.
the familiar emoji set that's known to all of us. So I think I'm still the
Wow.
only one, which is pretty cool.
That is
So
very cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then a publisher found me and contacted me, and that's the first time it ever happened to me. I published a whole bunch of books without calling the attention of the publishing industry, and this was the first time it ever happened to me. Hey, saw your saw your emoji Haggadah. We'd like to work with you on it and mass publish it around the world. What do you think? And I was like, what do I think? I've been waiting for you all my life. What do you mean, what do I think? Yes, here's my soul, and
Yeah.
uh, and let's sign on the dotted line, and
Wow.
and then people were just enamored with it. So I'm very proud. It sits open to one of the pages in the Library of Congress, in the room before you enter the Library of Congress itself. My Haggadah is sitting there to an open page as a form of visual art, which is
Wow.
not
It's a
something you
trip,
dream
man.
about. Yeah, it's total trip. Like, sometimes you dream of certain forms of success and they come your way and you're like, yay, that's what I was hoping for. But I wasn't imagining that my book is going to sit there open in the Library of Congress. That's a kick in the head, as they say. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's very cool.
And then,
Um,
yeah, and then I
so
learned, yeah.
I was gonna say about the Festivus hug. Oh, you have more you want to tell about that story or
I don't know, just that, and it just so happens to be that when I show it to people, the ones that understand it immediately, as we mentioned, are 8 to 12-year-old girls.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
it's a
like
certain
they just pick it
decipherability
up.
that they pick it up.
Yep.
Yeah,
Everyone else
that's very
puzzles
cool.
over it. Adults like get scared of it. But that's the target market that just completely just understands it without needing an answer key or a legend or anything like that. They're just ready
And
to get it.
someday those 8 to 12 year old girls will be, 30-year-old women, and then everybody will be understanding because everybody will have come up with this generation of emojis. So your audience will continue to expand. That's
I
why
hope
the
so. I hope
the
so.
Library of Congress was like, we need this because it's going to be all we're reading in 20 more years.
Yep.
Um, so I want to talk about the Festivus Haggadah next because we have an overlap because I think I did the yada yada Haggadah a year before that, and then but ours are very different. So we have a different style. Like I do a script basically, as
Hmm.
if the Seinfeld characters are having their own Seder. Whereas you do, I don't know what you call it, but it's almost like a weave. You do like a weave, a really strong weave of like all the references from the show with really the text of the like you do like the left side and the right side thing. You talk about a little bit later books. Um, so yeah, well, how would you describe your formal approach to doing this the Festivus I got? Like how do you describe that for yourself? Yeah.
So what I try to do with every single one is this weave, right? As we discussed at the top, if I have an idea that I think is going to work, I have to figure out how it's going to work with all the specific sections of the Haggadah.
Yeah.
Um, and I find the fits as, sometimes it's a stretch, sometimes it's not. And I was very surprised when sitting down and visualizing the Festivus Haggadah that it flowed almost from beginning to end. And as a matter of fact, the Festivus parts of the Festivus episode are about 4.5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, little trivia, the episode is known as the strike because that's what's actually the major plot point in the episode.
Yeah.
Kramer has been on strike for I think 12 years, and then the
Yeah.
strike is lifted and he returns to
Right.
work. And while that's happening, Frank Costanza schleps out the pole and starts driving George crazy, and then he tells George Kramer about this holiday that he made, and Kramer says, this is scratching me right where it itches, and that's it. It's 4.5 minutes of television,
Yeah.
and I managed somehow to stretch it. And then I realized, okay, I couldn't stretch it completely. It's only 4.5 minutes of TV. So then I decided, you know what, let me just pull in the rest of everything evolving around Frank Costanza. And then there was more, and I wasn't completely done yet. So I was like, you know what, I'm just pulling in the entire Seinfeld canon, and it'll be mostly about Festivus and largely about Frank Costanza, but the rest I
Yeah.
have to fill out. So one of my goals was to reference every single episode. There's 180 episodes of Seinfeld, at least twice, which I managed to pull off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was gonna say there's like a real like rabbinical kind of quality to the way you write where it's like Leviticus. It's like, there's like these lists of like, references in the Festivus one, particularly like, just kind of like listing things. Do you think in those terms like I'm gonna be like a rabbinical scholar of both Seinfeld and also Haggadah, like that and Judaism? Like, do you think like that? Is that what you're doing?
I think so. What I'm doing basically is I'm trying to make this fun, right?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
when I do book talks and when I do specifically the Haggadah, one of the things I claim, which is true, is that for 1,000 years it was just the Haggadah, and they threw in a little bit of artistic text, but that's all that it was. And even through
Yeah,
the 20th century, it was just this new rabbi wrote his new Haggadah with some commentary, and this new rabbi, and it's like none of this is fun. This is all scholarly. You got people dying at your Seder table, and they just can't listen to this all day.
yeah,
So this not a wall that broke, but this desire to only cater to the scholarly broke in the early 21st century. There was a book called Sammy the Spider's First Haggadah. It was like the first one ever for kids. And that was the first one that, basically said, you know what, this could be fun also. Do you want to entertain anybody else at the table? Why don't you
right.
why don't you make something a little more creative? So I was watching that.
What year was that?
I
Yeah.
think it was 2003, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there were a bunch of children's books, but nothing for teenagers until the Hogwarts Haggadah. Hogwarts
Right.
Haggadah, yeah, came out in 2017, if I recall
Right.
correctly, and that really was the first one for teens. And it's hard to pull in teens to something that's just stodgy and boring, and
Yeah.
when's the food coming?
Yeah.
Sebastian Maniscalco, who I'm sure you must know, is a comedian who talks about as a non-Jew sitting down at a Seder wondering what we're reading pamphlets now. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Well, he jumps around a
Yeah.
little harder than I do, but we're reading
Yeah.
pamphlets now. You're feeding me potatoes. What? What is
Yeah, for
this?
sure.
So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's probably a bit of what you're trying to do. And I'll ask you questions about that in a few minutes. But I'm just trying to entertain. I'm trying at this point to pull in everyone. People, and I actually get that feedback, which is glorious when people email me and they go, I wasn't really successful in bringing my kids to the table. It's really difficult. But this
Yeah.
year, you got your book, and oh my God, I had this
They're
conversation
into
with my
it.
son, and we got somewhere, and it was so nice. I was like, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. This is great.
Yeah. So do you think that is your legacy? We joke about the Guinness Book of Records and what do you think the cultural legacy of your work is? Like, we're at this moment, like we're Jewish Americans, both of us, and we're kind of melding the two traditions together. Like, talk to me more about this cultural legacy, both in the moments of what you're doing for your audience today, but also kind of what you're leaving behind, like in the Library of Congress, in this with this work? How would you talk about it?
So we're people of the book, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be dull. It doesn't have to be, the stereotypical image of a person sitting there like this studying away. It's Do you speak any Yiddish at all, Dave? Any?
Try me on
I'm
something. Go
guessing
ahead.
no.
Yeah.
So there's a great famous expression. It's schwer zu sein ein Yid. It's difficult to be a Jew. It's hard.
Mm,
It's hard.
mm.
It's not easy. No matter which level you are in your life, whether from any swing of the pendulum of the spectrum from secular to ultra religious, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Especially with how we're treated on the global stage. But we can still have a little bit of fun. We can
Yeah.
still try to charm ourselves and charm our family. When things are difficult and not working, you try to inject it with a little bit of humor. We've got the best comedians in the world in our entire history. There's absolutely a reason for that. Totally a reason for that. And I'm totally vibing with that attitude. And
Yeah.
and for my kids also, I'm not just sitting there. Come on over, we'll eat carpus now. And come on over. We just got some matzah for you. No, come on, let's have some fun. I'm trying
Yeah.
to entertain you. Let's have a look at this together. And this is actually what teachers in day schools are doing nowadays. They're trying to entertain, to pull you in. Everything to reach children now is a meme.
Right.
Absolutely
Right.
everything. So this
So
is this is
yeah,
what we're doing.
what do you think that could be one of your next book? Have you ever thought about a meme Haggadah? Haggadah? Like, have you ever thought of like what's your next book potentially? Have you thought about your next one yet?
Oh, I'm thinking about
Next
it all the
next Haggadah?
time. Ideas are
Yeah. What?
floating around big time. I can't
Yeah.
I
Can you
can't
share
nail one down.
any of the ones that you're thinking about, or
Yeah, let's see. So one recently came up, which I gave good thought, the Sherlock Holmes Haggadah.
so you think about them and you're like, well, and you kind of test them out, and if they don't work, you abandon them or something like
Yeah,
that. You
yeah.
test a lot of them. Oh
I
wow.
test I
Okay.
test them in my head the way I write in general, period, right?
Yeah.
This is not the only thing that I write, but basically, whenever I write anything, if it's an article
Right.
or even a Facebook post, first
Right.
first it's formulated in my head until it's so pregnant that it has to be written. So when I have enough ideas in my head and it's like, oh, this is going to work now, then everything I just drop it down on the page or the virtual uh, um, ones and zeros page, and bring it to life. So I've been toying with Holmes, but boy, I need a really skilled plotter because it's going to
Yeah.
have to be an actual mysterious tale. And I don't know if I have the full skills for that, but I like the idea. The idea is batting itself around in my head.
So Sherlock Holmes is potentially the one you're
Yeah.
saying.
And Squid
Yeah.
Games, like I mentioned before, Squid Games, I got it's like maybe there's a bad guy, there's an overlord. They're trying to be free, right? They're trying to get out.
True.
Maybe
Okay.
we'll fit.
All
We'll
right.
and whatever. I mean, there's something out there. There's that's gonna hit. And I got
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, for sure. I also a couple other questions. Like, if you could, I was gonna say something about like the Shakespeare one. Did you ever show it to a Shakespeare scholar? Like, I don't really know Shakespeare very well, so a lot of that's over my head. Like, do you ever show it to a Shakespeare scholar who's also Jewish and say like, "Hey, this is what I did. Like, what do you think of this?" Like, did you ever, for fun or before it was published, any of those things? Yeah.
Well, I didn't show it to a Shakespeare scholar on purpose, but it happened to find their way to some of them. So they reacted in different ways. So I got feedback. So one Shakespeare professor was entirely amused and totally
Yeah.
understood what I was doing. And another was like, you don't have your gerunds and tenses and um, Old English sentence structure correct. And I'm like, are you paying attention to what I was trying to
Wasn't very
do?
fun
I'm just
response. No.
playing. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
playing. That's all I'm playing. You have to appreciate what I was doing because just like with the Festivus Haggadah, I tried to quote every single one of Shakespeare's 37 plays at a minimum X amount of times, and I actually have a chart on how many times each of his plays is quoted. It's all the way at the end. So
Yeah.
everyone is quoted at least 5 times. So five was the minimum of every single play that gets quoted in the Shakespeare Haggadah.
It's impressive.
Pulled it off. So yeah, I like my footnoting. is something that I amuse myself with, and it seems like people appreciate that I do. It's like the little research part of it that people appreciate.
Very cool. Um, so let's see if any more questions. I actually had one other question is like, if you could time travel to one time and make a Haggadah about like something going on at that time, like could you do the coronavirus one, and you
Ah,
said that that one like no one like wants to read anymore because it was almost like it's like so much suffering was involved. But I think almost Passover is about suffering. Like we have to like pass on these stories of suffering through reading the Seder. And could you time travel to a certain time and make a Haggadah like of that era, like you did with the coronavirus one, like for about maybe a Jewish experience or something else? Like that's a question I had for you.
that's interesting. I got to think about that for a few seconds. But if I just give you a gut reaction, um, the as a writer, the greatest moment in writing history is probably the creation of the Gutenberg press. Um,
Mm,
and that's like a moment where knowledge just spread like wildfire,
yeah,
like kaboom,
yeah,
because you could, and books were went from being precious commodities that were priceless to absolutely everywhere. And that was the beginning of the Enlightenment. And I would have liked to have been around for the Enlightenment because we are no longer in the Enlightenment. But we're not going to get into a global societal discussion, but we are not. But I want to be in an age where Da Vinci exists and Michelangelo. Um, if you saw the latest Indiana Jones, it's completely enamored with Archimedes. Uh,
yeah.
Geniuses. I'm a great admirer of history's
I'll
geniuses.
say that to answer that question, to go back, I know we're transitioning to the other half hour. To answer
Yeah.
that question for myself, I would have liked to have been around during World War II for Hitler. I would have liked to have written like a really like anti-Hitler. If I was, wherever I was, I would have wanted to like fight that and with through the lens of a Haggadah.
Okay.
That's,
Interesting.
yeah, like just to like take that on. So I don't know if that's
You know,
crazy to
two
say, but
2 years ago, a Hitler Haggadah was published.
oh wow, yes,
It's
you're
such a
right, you're right.
strange thing. It's like
So what was it? What
I'm
was
not
it? Was
even
it like
sure. It's like one of those things that are like radioactive. You look at it and like, what is this exactly? Could I look at it?
yeah,
Like what that I haven't really investigated. I know it exists, now that you've motivated me, I gotta I gotta go take a look at it to see what exactly it is. But it's a strange thing. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the topic is. So that's our
yeah.
homework. Both our homework. We'll have a look.
fight fight the pharaohs of our
Yeah.
times. Um, so yeah, we're kind of recording this as like a also kind of live, but it's re-recorded, so hopefully it'll go out there again. But
Yes.
did you want to transition to
Yes.
flip the other way?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
absolutely. Let's transition. Dan has popped on. Hi, Dan. How you doing?
Martin, an absolute pleasure. Hello.
Oh, well, you got a whole lovely studio there. Nice.
Yeah, he's got it
Thank
going on.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Where are you? Is it Martin?
That's me.
Okay, just making sure not Martine or anything like that. Cool. Pleasure to meet you. Where do you live?
I live in Teaneck, New Jersey. Where do you live?
Ooh. I live pretty close to my man Dave in basically Hollywood, Los Angeles, but I'm from Long Island, so I
From Long
feel like a
Island.
fish out of water here.
All right, if you keep talking, I'll tease out all the Brenda and Eddie's in your accent because I find these things very easily.
It comes. You're right. It comes. You tell me when it pops up. I'm trying to purge my talking of all Long Islandisms, but I'm sure it's still there.
Yeah, and you can certainly find the Brooklynese patterns in my voice. I regress when I'm around my own. But I married. I like to tell people I married a Minnesota cowgirl, and she cleaned up my accent.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
Cleaned it up. There's certain words like I still can't say cartridge. I can't say the T and the R.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'm working on it. I'm absolutely working on it. I'm working on all the rest.
yeah. Fortunately, that's not a very common word. You can just avoid it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan. In this half hour that we're talking with Dave Cowen and Dan Lerman, I'd like to start off with something a little bit that would be an elephant in the room. Gentlemen, please tell me about your LA experience. Are you okay?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard to talk about LA because it's such a big place,
Mm.
and I was actually in New York when the fire was happening. But yeah, I have friends who were really affected by it. But I don't know. I feel fine now. I mean, it rained a lot, so I think the air quality is much better than it had been. Dan, what you were here, right? What was it? What was it like for you? Or
Yeah. We're fine now. I think during the time we were in Hollywood and our house was not at all in danger, but
Okay.
still going outside and having it feel like a post-apocalyptic world was mentally jarring. And my daughter's school was closed and everything like that. And there's some trickle-down effects that were weird, like parks were closed and all that. But everything now seems pretty much 100% back to normal in our part of town, which is not the Palisades, not Malibu, more Hollywood. Thank
Okay.
you for asking. Thank
Of
you.
course.
yeah, yeah,
All right. So that's out of the way, and we can elevate the mood. Um, so
Where do we
for
go from that?
I don't know. We rise up. That's what we do. So first of
Good.
all, as a tribute to you guys, as you can see, I am sitting in my office. This is where I like to spend my time, and is obviously a reference to my Star Wars Haggadah, which is two Haggadahs ago, not exactly the dad jokes Haggadah.
yeah.
I love origin stories. So Dan and Dave, we'll start with Dave though. Um, Tell me about your first Haggadah, just like you asked me in the first half hour. Where did this bubble up from your consciousness? And my next question to Dan will be, as I go through Dave's progression in Haggadahs, I'd like to know where you jumped into the picture with Dave once you started collaborating with him on the backyard plays we're going to talk about also. At which point is that, by the way? Did you know Dave when he published his first Trump Haggadah?
I didn't. So
No,
Dave, you can
yeah.
start.
Okay.
I'll run through it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar, Martin. Where like we're just the past has always been really boring in our life in my life, and I think Dan can recognize that too. That was for him as well. And so I had a family in LA that I wanted to like write funny things for because it was just so boring, and they really responded to it. And then we share with friends and family, and they were just like, "This is great!" Like they were using it in their lives, and then someone was just like, "You should publish this." And so at the time, I was really into political things. I was like really into like political humor, and Trump had just been elected, and it was just fun to think of him as like this Pharaoh character who just believed he was Moses, and obviously that's shifted a lot over time, especially for Jews in this era. But so that was kind of the impetus for the Trump one, and it was I don't know if I even think I had even seen the one you mentioned, the Harry Potter one, or I just was like, I'm gonna put this on Amazon and see what happens, and it like took off. I kind of like you, like it was like a top 500 book that spring. Everybody was really into it, and then as a screenwriter who's not the most successful screenwriter, I've always wanted to write for a show like Seinfeld. I've always wanted to write on a TV show, and then I felt like I was like, oh, I can like write an episode of Seinfeld that teaches Judaism, so I get the best of both worlds. I can like pretend I was on this staff and write this fun thing, and also give my community something that they're really going to enjoy. Who are like everybody I know who's Jewish loves that show. So that's how that one came about. And then Biden came into office, and it was like, well, this feels like another obvious sequel, and that was fun. And then Curb, like I just love Larry David, and I got really into spirituality more myself, and so I made that kind of like a Kabbalah themed one. So it's Kabbalah and Curb, and then yeah, the more controversial one was Kanye.
Yeah.
I that's getting more and more controversial, but I really like him, or I've liked him, and I've also have his mental health issues, and so I can kind of relate to him, and I also just love music. There's actually a lot more than just Kanye. Like there's Bob Dylan, there's Billy Joel, there's tons. Like everybody else is a Jewish musician, and him at a Seder table. So maybe it needs a
He's
rebrand
gonna
at
be
this point. Maybe
offended by that, Dave. He's not
yeah,
gonna
it's also
like
supposed to
that.
like give him something to like think about and be like, hey, maybe you're wrong about some of these things. So that was a really cool one. I actually like that one, though it's hard to talk about sometimes, but it's got a lot of fun music in it. Then Mel Brooks was like, he made up parodies, in a big way. Like he made movies that were parodies that people hadn't really seen that on a movie screen. So I felt like, I've been doing, 5 or 6 books of parodies. So why not make a parody book about, the Jewish king of parodies? So that was really fun. And somewhere around Kanye, Mel Brooks, I met Dan at this pickleball tournament, and a celebrity pickleball tournament, and we just hit it off because we love tennis and pickleball. And Dan also, his dog is named Afi Coleman, and then Dan invited me to start doing these theaters with him with Seinfeld, and then I'll let Dan tell the rest of the story. Yeah, so
Dave, what was the shirt you were wearing at the pickleball tournament? It was something about God.
Oh yeah, I think I have a shirt that's like a Harvard insignia, and it says "I need God," being the joke that like Ivy League people I went to Ivy League school, like we often like never talked about God or anything spiritual or religious at that time in history. It was always just like this very other kind of mindset of science and a liberal arts thought. So it was like a meme shirt that was like that. I think maybe that connected us. But yeah, I've always been interested in kind of spirituality coming more into my life in weird ways. Yeah.
So, Martin, you got to
Um,
see the scene. We're like at the celebrity pickleball tournament. We're watching Emma Watson play pickleball. She's awesome. She's a great pickleball player. And I turn to my right and I see this like guy wearing a shirt that says "I need God." I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. And I think within the first 2 minutes, Dave told me about his Seinfeld Haggadahs.
Yeah.
And I think I can't remember exactly how it came up, but my wife and I love getting people together. We had the same experiences growing up. Passover was so boring. You would
so
like
boring.
prepare the paragraph you were going to read, and then it got to you at the table, and you try and read it in your best English, and no one gave a shit. Can I say shit? No one gave a shit.
I don't have a dump button. I don't know how that works on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try not to curse going forward, but there's a lot of built up sadness around how boring Passover was. So I said, Dave, I love what you've done. Second night of Passover this year, let's get some friends together in my backyard and we'll do a Seinfeld Seder. Like, let's just do an
Yeah,
event. We're doing a lot of events in my
yeah.
backyard. I run
Dan
this
does these
comedy show. Yeah.
backyard comedy shows that are really popular in LA and Larchmont, and they're going almost monthly now for a couple of years. And so he's used to doing these huge backyard events that are really fun.
So we did this event about I think it was 25 people, 90s theme, and we read the Seinfeld Haggadah like it was like a table read of an episode of Seinfeld. And man, this thing is so funny. It's written, it could be a Seinfeld episode. It's hysterical. People were doing Israeli accents. It was just
All
like
right.
wild to see people come out of their shells to read the text that Dave wrote. And that event was so much fun and such a hit and kind of made us all feel like this is what our ancestors were like wanted to get together and laugh and have fun. And then out of that came the idea like let's write a new one.
Yeah, and that was awesome because like I'll be honest, like I think Dan really revitalized The Office. Like, did you read it yet, Martin? I can't remember if you
Yes,
read The
I
Office. I
just
got it.
finished reading
Yeah.
it this weekend.
Oh, nice.
I should preface this by saying that I've seen a couple of episodes, so
Oh, okay.
and then I had to refamiliarize myself with the characters because I really wanted their voice in my head when I was reading it. So I did the best that I could because I know you put in the effort, you guys, to make that true to form and true to life.
Oh, yeah,
So I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Thanks.
yeah. I think what Dan brought to it is just like so much revitalization of like an audience focused thing. Like I think the Seinfeld was so audience focused, and then the Kanye one was a little bit weird. But Dan is just like, let's make this like as funny as possible. Let's make this as like true to The Office as possible. And I think it really comes through. Like, I talk to us like Dan. What do you think is like? We basically were like, let's do season three, season four. Let's stop there. Let's make it like a time to the actual arc of the show. Like, what was our thought process? Would you say?
It's like this was like if you went into the archives of the writer's room on The Office, this would have been
Yeah,
pitched as an episode towards the end of season three of The Office, which I think is some of the funniest, best TV of all time.
Okay.
And in this episode, they happen to stage a Passover Seder in order to save Dunder Mifflin as a company. In
yeah. And so
theory,
the
that
funny
could have
thing,
happened, you know?
yeah. So the client they're looking for is Maxwell House. They're trying to get Maxwell House as a client because Maxwell House makes all these pagodas for
Uh-huh.
they're giving away for free, and it's all these paper they're printing. And so we're like, oh, okay, Dunder Mifflin is a paper company. They're going to want to get a client to save their company to print paper. So that was kind of the larger concept. And then there was these other storylines revolving around Judaism. I don't know if you so Roy is Pam's boyfriend before she gets with Jim later in the show, and he's pretty mean to her. Like he's just always like the worst boyfriend. I mean, you look back on it, it's like wow, I can't believe they're together for even for 3 seasons. And so we have this storyline where he's like they get tested for 23andMe, and she finds out she's partly Jewish. She's really happy to like celebrate her heritage, but Roy is like low key anti-Semitic and just is really rubbed the wrong way by it. So we're really kind of edgy in its own way of what we're playing with in terms of mixing the Judaism with the office. But there is still always, there is still always every part of the Seder is in there. I think you always have a more like rabbinical, liturgical, like textual approach to it, whereas ours is maybe more Hollywood and more free of some of those ties. But I think there's still always teaching there. There's always you're always going to learn something about the Passover through the text. What would you say about that, Dan? Yeah.
Well said.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm trying to do is as I mentioned to Dave in the first half hour, I still want it to be a practical Haggadah, and I want people to appreciate what I'm doing by making it both an absolutely practical Haggadah and fun for everyone sitting at the Seder.
Okay.
So you're
Yeah.
like Dave said, you're a little freer from those constraints, but I like constraints because I find constraints better for my creativity. Like
Oh, for sure.
when something has to fit into a certain box, your brains work differently to make it happen.
It's
Um,
really well said, Martin. I
yeah,
think just having that structure of this needs to happen, then this needs to, that was super helpful and I think saved us a lot of time creatively.
cool. And do you have any other ideas that you're working on, or you're exhaling after writing The Office? And why was The Office the one? Did you like draw up like a boggle chart of things you both enjoy pop culturally, and then The Office was the one that you both like? Oh, we both like this one. How did that work?
I think I talked about it, and then I was like, "You should do this with you, man." And you were like, "Actually, that's one of my favorite shows." Like you like, I know the show so well, and you knew. I think you knew it better than me, honestly. When we sat down and started working on it, and so Dan's a comedian, and he's really good with voices. He's very like, you're almost like an actor. You could be an actor in the future life or this life, and so I think we were like both were like, this is a show we both know. I don't know. What was your how would you look at it? Yeah.
I view the world in terms of lists, like what are your top three favorite fruits or like that kind of thing. And I always have a list of my top three favorite comedies of all time, and it's Seinfeld, Arrested Development, The Office. Seinfeld, Arrested Development, The
Oh,
Office are
there you
my top
go.
three of all
There you
time.
go.
You've done Seinfeld. We talked about Arrested Development for a hot second and thought it was a
It's a
little
little bit
too
niche
niche.
right at the moment.
And then The
Yeah.
Office, the big thing, Martin, is it felt like it was in the zeitgeist because they are currently filming the sequel to The Office, which I believe is called The Paper. I don't know that much about it, but I know
Oh
Alex
my gosh.
Edelman is in it. And so The Office is going to be back in the public zeitgeist in the next year with a new series.
Oh, cool. And also, like, even my sister, I was like, oh, I did this one this year, and she was like, oh, cool, I didn't know you're doing another one. And then she was like, I'm actually watching The Office right now. Like, she's watching, like, she's already like into like season five again with her husband. So I think like people really are always watching that show. It's one of those shows that's like, it's on Peacock or Netflix, whatever it's on. Like, the people are really, really loving it still.
Yeah,
So
kids
we
in
want
high
to
school are
feel that.
watching it.
Yeah, a lot of memes. Like people are always posting The Office memes, at least in my algorithm. Um, but yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to Dan specifically about this, but I'm interested in doing more with him, and I just want to go through all kind of like the canon of comedies and kind of
Yeah.
like The Simpsons, and there's so many you could do. And I'm ready. I want to just go forever. Like Mark, me and you are competing in a way. Are you going to keep going yearly? Are you going to go yearly? Like I plan on. I want to go until I die yearly. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I have a personal goal. First of all,
Good.
I don't know if you've seen that I post every time I publish a book, I build the stack, and I
Yeah.
put it next to my foot, and my goal is to have it reach the top of my head. So,
Wow.
and if it,
Oh, I didn't know that.
oh,
Okay.
absolutely, that is the goal.
How
So,
tall are you?
5'8.5". So, my book stack is almost a foot. So, so.
Okay.
Lot to go. Lot
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah. I have
go.
to like I think I have to publish another 113, but if I publish thicker books,
Yeah.
we
Are
can
these all your books or Haggadahs? Are these
all
or all of them?
my books, they reach my
All
calf.
of them.
They
Okay.
reach my
Got
calf.
it. Got it. Wow.
So yeah, that's my goal. That's what I'm working on. I'll never stop. I'm the kind of guy, once I'm addicted to something, I will never become unaddicted to it. So it's a good thing I've made some healthy choices in my life.
Yeah, like running. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Yeah, as we mentioned way at the top of this program, I just completed a half marathon this morning,
Oh,
and
cool.
I've done a bunch of marathons, and I'm like, I'm not the kind of guy, people, they finish the marathon and they're like, I'm done, never again. And I'm like, I don't understand you. It was If you enjoyed it, so then you must do it again and again and again and again ad nauseum. So yeah, so I'm in this for the long haul as well. Um, and I'm always looking at your idea, frankly, to see what I might enjoy. We've both tackled. By the way, we're not the only tacklers of the Seinfeld canon. So you did the yada
It's
yada, and I did
true.
the Festivus. It was a rabbi, Rabbi Sam Reinstein. He
He did
published.
another one.
He did it.
Yeah.
It was called the Haggadah about nothing. So
Yeah.
so he gave it a
He's a
rabbinic.
rabbi
He
too,
is.
so
He
his
gave it
was,
a
yeah, his was more
rabbinical
real.
spin, and it's more of an erudite rendition of
Yeah,
Seinfeld, but that is like well covered just because it's Seinfeld is so classic.
it
Um,
is.
and by the way, has caught on with the current generation, just like Friends has, which is just like a marvelous thing to have occurred in the universe.
Well,
It's just amazing. I wrote a whole bunch of notes about everything, Dan, that you said before, and I have to follow up on those. You
sure.
actually named your dog after Coleman?
Of course, Afi for short. Sometimes people don't know what the
Afi.
hell that is. So in LA, we say Afi, AFI for American Film Institute. It's
Oh,
kind of our
beautiful.
cover if we don't want to explain. Sometimes we're just like it's a Jewish thing. But in
Yeah.
in LA, it's people we say it to are like, that's amazing.
I mean,
Okay.
that seems like part of the fates of us getting together for this stuff is dog is literally named Afikomen. I mean, it doesn't get more,
So for than that.
kismet than that.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
And I have homework for you guys. Have you ever seen the clip of Larry David presenting at an awards show where he talks about being a rich prick versus a poor schmuck?
No, enlighten
No.
us.
No. Well, that's for you to take away, and for all the viewers, it's one of the funniest things you'll possibly ever see.
Well, I'll tell you, I love doing the Curb Your Enthusiasm one because I love putting the Kabbalah into it. I don't know. Did you take a look at that one ever, Martin? Or
I've
can't
read
remember?
everything you've ever written.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, brother. That's nice. I like that one because it's like Larry's so unhappy, the whole show. He never gets unhappy. And it's like I do think that, and even I think that bringing some spirituality to your life can make you happier. And so I think that there's a funny irony to that one in particular where it's like, okay, we're kind of teaching you about Kabbalah, about spirituality in a funny way, and maybe that's going to help you if you look into it. So I really that one I particularly loved. I think it was really funny. It was also really like helpful potentially.
Oh,
And
very cool.
actually, Jay Michelson, who's a rabbi, he helped me with that one. He does a lot of reviews for the Forward. We became friends. We did some reviews for my earlier ones, and he kind of fed me Kabbalah interpretations of Passover, and I put those into the book. It was actually that book, the Holistic Haggadah, Dan, that I share with you. That was one of the ones that he
Yeah.
gave me as kind of inspiration. So I think there's a lot of sustenance with some of these books. Some of them are just pure funny and weird, and some of them are going to help you out maybe.
All right. I have a little trivia for you guys.
Yes.
You mentioned Maxwell House. So I was commissioned by the Jewish Book Council to write an article about the history of the Haggadah. And I called it A Brief History of the Haggadah. And I mentioned, of course, mine, and I threw in Dave's as well. And there was one particular factoid that I found that you must find fascinating. If the Maxwell House Haggadah was an actual published book, it would be the seventh best-selling book of all time.
Oh,
Wow.
really?
Yeah,
Wow,
like between two of the
fascinating.
Harry Potters or something like that.
How
And
did you determine that statistic? That's a really
because
interesting
I saw it
statistic.
written up. It sold X like several hundred million, and it ranks right up there.
Were
Several
they
hundred
given away
million.
for free? How did
Yeah,
they
yeah.
price that?
I
They're
mean
giving
to
away.
say, but yes. So 150 million, I think, were printed. The number could be wrong, but
Right.
I do
Wow.
know it's between a couple of Harry Potter books in the top 10, and it's definitely
Wow.
number seven.
Wow. We have a
That's a
Um,
joke
great
like that
stat.
in our book, actually. I mean,
oh,
you guys keep talking. I'll see if I can find the joke that's basically that.
Yeah.
um, here's a question. You've written your books. My books are uh, not tied into human personalities, except for the Festivus Haggadah, which is tied into George Costanza very much. But yours are very human personality. Have any of your books reached any of the people that you parody? And have you ever gotten feedback from any human being at all invoked by anything you've ever written? Or
Well,
even
you have a
close?
story about this, Dan. Did you give one of did you give the Seinfeld one to Jason Alexander?
Yeah, Jason Alexander did a so George Costanza, Jason Alexander did
Uh-huh.
a book reading at the local bookstore here in Larchmont Village. And I have to say, he was so cool and nice. And like, you read this like picture book to kids that could not care about him at all. They're like running over all over the room. And afterwards, I went up to him and I slipped him Dave's Haggadah. I said, "Look what you inspired." And he looks at me and goes, "This is better than Maxwell House."
But did
That's
he do it
funny.
with passion? Did he do it with, like,
He
he
took
got
it with passion, and I'm sure he,
I think
didn't read it
there's
every
a
day.
photo too. But yeah, there's a quote here. You know, Maxwell. So Michael Scott says, you know, he's a Maxwell House is the large publisher of Passover Haggadahs. The book was a promotional tool. They started in 1934, and those books are still printed today, hundreds of pages long, thousands of copies every year. I guess it should be millions of copies on great American paper and given away for free, all to sell more coffee because of their great Jewish American songwriter Leonard Bernstein wrote in West Side Story. I like to be in America. Okay, buy me in America. Everything free in America for a small fee in America. So yeah, I think Maxwell House does this weird thing where they like give it away for free, but they're also like getting money because you're buying coffee, which I thought, you know. So I don't know how you define this millions of copies, but it's it's interesting that they
Yeah,
did that.
yeah, absolutely. Wow, we're at the top of the hour that we've spent together. Would you like to turn it over to Q&A if you think anybody might have any questions?
But we got we don't have that many potential, but
That's
we
true.
got Nat and Zal. But yeah, go for it if anybody wants to try question.
And if not, we can continue the conversation. It's all good.
I have
Um,
one for the room. If
Yeah.
it's is there, and anyone could chime in, like, I guess for your work, Dave, it's been mainly TV shows, I guess not entirely. What do you think would, like, how do you pick your source material? And Martin, if you want to chime in too, like, what do you think tickles your fancy? What are you drawn to?
Who's first?
uh, yeah, I guess I would say you know they did the two political ones, and I do want to do another Trump one, honestly, in his term. I know that's going to be controversial, but I want to do another Trump one, and you know, then there was the Mel Brooks one, which is more movies. I would like to do like a Judd Apatow or like a Woody Allen. Like I do like I really want to run the gamut of every kind of like Jewish American entertainer. You know, even like you know, so Seth Rogen, those kinds of guys. I think anything's fair game. Like it has been TV because TV is kind of like an episode, and like a Seder could be an episode. But you know, yeah, that's how I think about it. Just Jewish American entertainers and politicians. Recently, I've been thinking about it. What about you, Martin?
Me, actually, as we were talking, I remembered some other ideas that have been bandied around, you know, having bubbled up out of my own brain or people coming at me. But the Star Trek Haggadah is an idea that's come at me.
That would
Um,
go well with the Star Wars. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so, and I'm thinking about it, but there's so many Star Treks and so many Moseses that I don't know how to constrict it to like the four main Starfleet commanders. Like how does that work? Because I think there's been nine series. Like how do I narrow it down without ticking off the people who will be like, how do you leave out Deep Space Nine when you raise this series, you know? So I'm not sure what to do with that, but it's an idea that's out there. And I actually started writing the Klingon Haggadah. And then I
There you go.
realized, and then I researched how many people actually speak Klingon on this little ball of blue of ours, and the answer is 32 humans.
32.
32. So
Wow.
that's my target audience. If I
How many of
would
them are
write
Jewish though, too?
so if you go with statistics, so two would be Jewish,
Oh,
and that's
wow.
my target audience. But I don't think that will go over very well.
And one of them is you, apparently. So you have
Exactly.
you and someone else.
So I'm going to
Very
sell
funny.
one book to one stranger, and that'll take up a year of my life. I don't think so. But I started trying. I tried to make a transliterated version, like I had Klingon on one side, and then the pronunciation, and then the Hebrew and the English translation. And I made 2 pages of this, and I was looking at it. I was like, nobody in the world is gonna buy this. But at least I started. Like a lot of ideas are abandoned if they don't work. But I always love trying to at least start the creative process. So I started it with that one. That's not going anywhere.
Have you seen the book 300 Ways to Say Manashtana?
Absolutely.
So in there is a Klingon transliteration and has become a yearly classic in our family.
So I reference that
Whoa.
every year, looking for the next idea. And it actually inspired something beyond what I saw in this particular book. I was thinking, what if I make a Generation Alpha Haggadah and convert the entire English text into how they speak, how everything is fire and slay and so forth. But then, this is another one that where I'm developing an idea and it goes nowhere because it's really just 15 words that they're skibbity toilet riz, my son says all the time. That makes no sense whatsoever, but it's a phrase. Um, and again, it's just 15 words. Now, if it was an entirely new vocabulary, if there were like 200 or 250 completely new revamped words that people were using, I think that would be a great idea, but it almost never is. Like every generation comes up with like 10, 15 new phrases, and the rest is just the usual
Or you
language.
could do a generational one. You could do
Yeah,
all generations together. You could do like, what I'm trying to say about that? You like have like stuff for like a boomer section, you have a silent generation section, a millennial section. You just do all different slangs for all people that are at the table. That could be really cool. You could do
so I was thinking
that.
about that, and we are definitely going to explore that idea a little more
All right.
because that also has been on my mind. This I'm
The
always
generational slang Haggadah. There you
yeah,
go. Haggadah.
something
Yeah.
something to that effect. Because I'm a
See,
fan
we
of
just came up with your next one right here,
it could
Martin.
be,
We just
it
did
could
it.
be.
We just did it.
Yeah,
At the
absolutely.
moment.
I'm a fan of language. I'm a fan of literature. I write and I write and I write. This is all I do. I'm a tech from 9 to 5, and I'm a writer from 5 to 9. That's how I position myself. And in more business parlance, I'm a writer by day, a technologist by night. Excuse me, the other way around. Technologist by day and a writer by night. I have a, that's my Batman and my Bruce Wayne. So ideas are constantly flowing in and out. So a generational slang, possibly. Um, all right,
All
just
right.
whatever works.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, it's been fun, man. I'm glad you set this up. I think we got some cool material to share. We should release this as like a podcast or something like that.
yeah,
Just get it out
absolutely.
there.
I will
You
make
want to send me
sure.
the file and when it's done recording?
Absolutely, I will hit the record button unless anyone wants to chime in of
Oh
our
yeah,
of
sorry.
our honored guests and ask a few questions. I'll be happy to record those for posterity. If not, thank you everyone so much for coming. Thanks for being here. I'm gonna hit the record button and perhaps we'll continue the conversation. Thank you
Thank you,
everyone
Martin.
for
That was
showing up.
great.
All right.